Hello future humans, it's Naji Coach here, and today I'm going to be responding to a post in the forum, the PodLayer Experiment Forums by Glenn. Glenn is a friend of mine who has been working with PodLayer for some years, and now he is helping to test pilot going through the experiments we're going to use to try to build up the best, I guess, gradated stepping stones to get through all the feats required to track the Mojo phenomenon we can, starting with the easiest and working up to the most challenging. All right, so he has done the, it looks like we're doing the eyes. Okay. So with the add ob tours, what Glenn says, I noticed that on top of the ob signal that I was registering, I was also noticing that my eyes were fixating around the eyes and eye fascia. I'm curious how strong that was. My plan is to actually make noting eyes versus mouth later on. But yeah, I'm glad you can see that. The eyes also seem to give a quality of being very receptive, as well as the overall face seemed very loose and relaxed, which is native to Add Mojos. Their energy also struck me as approachable as compared to wanting to set boundaries, which would be altered state for them. Very interesting and different from my own personal way of approaching life, but nonetheless still valuable and appealing to me. Glenn's referencing that he is a DIR Mojo. I don't do public reads anymore, but back when I was doing that, I read Glenn as a Naji. This is the DIR sub tour, male female. Before doing the DIR sub tour, I first tried to predict what I would see and feel. I knew that the energy from the samples would be heavier in feel and more intense, but seeing is believing. Going through the collage, I noted that I was correct, but my thoughts weren't exactly referring to things I had seen necessarily. Making a prediction and then seeing if it would come true made me seek out what I had initially thought I would expect, and then later maybe want to adjust how I came at the Mojo phenomenon initially. That's very interesting. Yeah, I'll come back to that maybe. Besides that, the eyes looked very intense to me with this group, and the face came across more rigid and tense as well. Oh, that's okay. There is also this energy of being moved by the sample that was interesting to note. It's very different from the add-obs and their desire to take in and become molded by energy. Interesting. The DIR subs seem to have desire to be the molder or to have things be a certain way. Interesting. Okay, so like a couple different things here. One is on making the prediction. So is that something that you found, I'm curious what prompted you to do that. What, if you can maybe articulate, what was the interest or the value added that kind of prompted that to happen? And then did you get something for that you would call like a value added? If we could give it like a form, because that could make a nice sort of, reward system going forward, because we can do this, because that is kind of what the questions at the end of series 1 were about, which is, can you see it, and does this look like some sort of craft or skill where the doing of it is a rewarding experience? So kind of being able to specify some things that they may find rewarding to do, that could be helpful. Yeah, so making a prediction, I'm curious what other ways of just sort of presetting themselves, or maybe, yeah, I'm not sure, maybe just any kind of mental dialogue of what they think of beforehand and then doing it. And then afterwards, how did that feel? Because I kind of emphasize how does it feel during to talk about, but it's interesting to talk about the pre-phase and the post-phase and like the whole process of that, because there are rewards in it. Obviously, I feel that a lot, and you do as well. So it'd be good to be able to kind of like define what those are better. I'll work to do that more. If you have ideas, that'd be great as well, on defining that sort of cycle and then the rewards, the natural rewards that are a part of that. All right, cool. Then you also mentioned here about it being more rigid or tense. Now that gets into more advanced cues. I had planned on doing baseline tensioning, officially, and like the next wave, maybe like the series 1. This first set series I'm doing, set of series, is going to be the beginner set, and then I'm going to have an intermediate and advanced. So I was thinking that's going to be something I want to get more into in intermediate. But maybe I can hint at it, since you said you were able to see this fairly strongly, is that perhaps, the quiz and the way it's set up works well enough with just the eyes, but mentioning things that might be there. I don't want to overwhelm a new person, but there will be some difference in talent levels when people come in, and so it may be appreciated if there's like an extra little thing that you can pay attention to if you want to, like an optional. So yeah, like that pre-setting thing might be like an optional thing people can do if they want to add to the experience, but then so is this rigid tense quality, which will hint at baseline tensioning, which is the whole body and the face, that I'll get into officially in the intermediate level. But yeah, I think hinting at it, at least, optional to look for that if you want, could be a good thing to do. So maybe just make that like a pro tip. Yeah, like I might do that if you get to it first, but making that pro tip in this forum thread. You use the word molder. I like it, but as we found out, words are very tricky, but I like it. Take in and be molded. Molding, I really, that does seem like a strong wording. So I'd like to add it to the pantheon, as long as we understand that for these kinds of things, there is going to need to be a variety of current word usage that are used to kind of get the gist of something, and then for other things, we'll just have to make new words like der and ob and things, of that nature. We'll just have to nigh and knee, because there's no way really to describe it with the word. But other things, kind of like, what is der sub? We already got that word, but they're like, okay, but what does that mean? Well, here's a few things. Here's a few words we can use. I like that. That's good. Right now, it's the ad versus der sub. The quiz went quickly for me and was also really accurate. I should also mention that it was done on my first try as well. Good for you. But given that I have more experience, it makes a lot of sense for this to not be so hard for me. Correct. Although, I'm enjoying a lot the fact that you know this, because Jarlene and I have been doing it as well, is I am able to note the difficulty changes, and I've actually adjusted some of how I've laid out these series when I actually do the different kind of tours or quizzes. I'm like, oh, I can do both, but I can feel that this one is easier to do or this one is harder to do. Although I can do both within comfortably my skill and my lens power range. I can note that was a little different into it, and that difference for me, it's like, it's not a big deal, but it's notable. Notable for a person who's new, that could be quite substantial. So this is good feedback. Overall, though, this quiz was good for me to do and easy in the sense that the ob sub quality was somewhat assisting me, but I was not actually focusing on it to pull the samples. Instead, I was relying on the eyes and the boundary setting and approachability signals. I'm really enjoying being able to separate these out. And even like, for example, beginner, intermediate, and advanced parts of that. So taking in all of knee, including baseline, which we're doing coming up soon, but then also perk up and what that looks like with knee, and then also the bobble. So you kind of can take it all in, but then also... So really being able to get all around our skill set and know what those individual things are, so we can actually pick the right ones each time and be able to flex it with a strength and fluency. This is now the ad sub tour. The ad subs were a nice collage to go through and add another layer on top of the math of der and ad. Instead of the obs, I got to see how subs look like when they're also ad, and it was an interesting experience. The faces are longer, but the overall ad signal is still very similar, if not the same. I focused primarily on the inner parts of the face, and when doing my reading, and when doing so, I noticed a very relaxed and approachable energy that was very balanced in qualia. Very cool, and I'm interested in getting into the next quiz. Okay, so one thing I'm wondering here is, this is good observation, is that feeling. We could perhaps describe that as a ride. If you're able to see these patterns, then they take you for a very nice ride. In this case, it's a calming ride through reading these signals of other humans. So that's something that could also be posited as a reward, a personal reward one gets if that's something that you find interesting or empowering, embettering, whatever. That's a good experience for a person, and it sounds like it was there for you. But I like being able to say it that way. You notice like it happened. That could be going back to the pre-experience, like saying, you may note this. Yeah, because that also would help them to know what to look for. Because that is a cue. The feeling, that sensation is a cue because they have that effect on you. But yeah, we'll posit it as like the firm thing they're going for. The firm thing they're going for is the other, qualia. But noting that that can be an effect of the ride, that can be, that can be a reward. That helps them actually do it better. They'll actually have a better understanding of what's going on, and it can be another reward system. It's like a bonus. You may feel that. I mentioned that in another vlog, I think. Oh yeah, I was prepping. Is that like the flow? The feeling of flow is something that you actually will get more used to as you do Mojo reading, and you're in the zone. So yeah, these other kind of sensations, experiences that go along with these various cross-section rides, these quiz and tours. Yeah, I like that. We've probably over time collect these things that we're noting in this regard and make like a package that people can go, oh, these are kind of some things that you'll experience possibly doing these things, and does that potential experience interest you and sound like it might be valuable? Next up is Der Ob. This is another good collage where I was able to see the Der Ob in action doing their various still life pictures. The energy hit me as being very strong and forward. Interesting word. I actually thought about using that word, and I didn't, because I was like, well, you can be strong forward, but also strong in place. But yeah, I know what you mean. Words are tricky, because that does resonate with me as well as a description, very strong and forward. Just note that they're strong actually has other connotations as well that could like relate to the add sub powers or palettes and so forth, but different as compared to the Der Subs. The Der Obs don't seem as heavy to me, but instead seem more engaging and comfortable while steering and taking the wheel of life, as it were. They seem to set boundaries more with their overall presence, mouth and cheek area as compared to their stare, but their eyes do contribute somewhat too. So overall presence. Okay, I like that. That might be a turn of phrase that could be used. Overall presence. Yeah, because there's like a forwardness, and maybe like their overall presence is a way. Maybe someone might not know what forwardness means in this context, but overall presence could be good. If they don't understand what that is, maybe forwardness. So it's good to have more than one word that can try and describe what it is they're going to be looking for. Next is Add Sub versus Der Ob, the quiz. The quiz felt harder as compared to the one I did with the Add Obs and Der Subs, which is reflected in my grade. I think I know why. I believe that I'm more accustomed to seeing the Der signal when it comes to males, but less so with the females, definitely. And even when you have some familiarity, there's always the yin of being female that kind of weighs, and that's an extra yin. You'll have to say yes, but they're still Der. So, when you're trying to read someone as a Der overall, any signals they're giving you that hit you as add, you'll have to go yes, but. So that's another yes, but that you have to do, so it is a little more effort. Let's see. Along with that, the Zevi is quite difficult to grasp for me currently, since I have less experience with their Mojo. Yeah, I know what you mean, but I'm feeling much better now. I've been working with them for a while now to clean that up, figure that out, and aha. Yes, aha. All right, both the female samples, the difficulty is stacked. Yes. This is a good data for me to work with, though, because it helps me better understand my individual lens and how to improve it in certain spots that need more attention. Definitely. That I'm really liking this, and I think it's something that I'll do that as I go through the program and stack these various experiment series and then into intermediate series and advanced series. I want to come back and do them again, you know what I mean, in the years to come and see how much stronger I am. And also just, it feels good to go in and go, aha, lens here, lens here. You know what I mean, to keep turning and note that you went through and you touched everything and gave it a nice cleaning and flexing. That feels, yeah, sorry, I'm trailing off on there because that sounds very, very appealing. But yes, we obviously had to figure out the first time through. All right, here we go. So you've taken the tour of all the ad and tour of the dir, and then you did the quiz. The quiz was overall an enjoyable experience and easier than what I anticipated it to be. I initially thought that putting together with all the various mojos into one quiz would cause a lot of confusion between separating cues out, but this didn't happen. Good. I'm curious, do you think that that is something that would be experienced by someone whose lens was less aware and less strengthened? Maybe not as much as you. Do you think it might be notable at all? Because if so, that could be something to kind of point out, and then when that happens, that's another kind of proof of concept, that experience. Let's see. In fact, to combat this perceived decrease in ability, I made sure to look at each sample very carefully before clicking on any buttons. This is good practice because it worked for me and made me aware that when I really want something and focus my attention on getting it, I can increase my reading ability from just that stance alone. That's a very good point. Actually, both of them. So one is the stance and just coming at it with that extra focus, you can flex on it more. But then also is mentioning that the difficulty level might be slightly higher and that they should spend a little more time and make sure their flex is done fully. May kind of emphasize in this language, like you want to make sure you can still flex, and when you are doing a quiz that is more challenging in some way, then you can make sure when you flex that you're taking the extra time to make sure you got it. That concept, that could be something to maybe get into maybe one of the series in this first one, the beginning series. With that being said, when one is starting out anything new, there is a need to summon a lot of oneself, but as one practices more, the exercise becomes easier and one can do it on autopilot. I like to reach this point, but it takes work to get there, and that baseline ease has to be earned. Indeed, that was a point I was planning on making is, well, actually, at the end of this series, the beginner series, is that they will have opened up their third gear. They will be able to do third gear, and that's like a gear you have to earn turning that on, but it's a very powerful and useful gear once that's done. So yeah, I had that planned, but also pointing out other things that will be rewarding could be a nice way to build up to that. So now I did some extra credit, 1,000 random. This quiz was quite hard, and I was wondering as I did it if I was going to be able to pass it on my first run. I'm glad I did, but I really learned that there are a lot of gender mojos that I have yet to truly get a good grasp over when it comes to their dir and ad energies. Yes, and as a part of it goes both ways. Jailene and I were talking about this, is also your understanding of dir and ad. So you'll be understanding that individual quality category better, but because they are one of the dir or one of the ad, that'll be rewarding in both sides of the lens. That specific case, but that case, particularly now in the beginning with the less than 1,000 samples, is it is elucidating on whole palettes. The one that actually Jailene and I were talking about was Vi. How one of the areas is the Vi first females. That's an area that we don't have as nearly as much progress on as we do in other areas, and so obviously we want that because we want to know them, those two. But being Vi first and two of them like that, that's actually also, when that comes online, the overall understanding of what Vi is, it's missing female Vi first input to actually round that out. So that's very exciting. And for example, the V's eyes are notoriously hard for me, and it's because they all have yang components to their makeup, like Ab and Zez among others. But they are ad, which is like a wrench being thrown in my lens. Yeah, a wrench, or I like actually thinking it as like a wave, so it's like a positive thing. There's these various signals, and you have to surf them and find that place where it all comes together. And there certain waves like these you're like, oh, on those kinds of waves that break that way, I have to adjust my lens. But that's a regular wave. That happens. That's a regular thing. And so I have to make sure that, I adjust my footing to account for that. Another mojo grouping is the dir females. They have a lot of yin qualities, indeed. Another thing came up for you was Nizai males, which can be seen as dir a lot of the time. I think that probably is the... I'm curious if you feel at all for... Well, you said the V's eye as well, so both them. It's the Zai and passiveness. Make sure to fully grasp that is, in fact, ad, although impassive seems kind of yang. Jaivi females, yes, they can have this nigh huntress thing going on. I've noticed that as well, and that I think that perhaps on that, maybe there's a lot of riffs that are not like that, but Jaivi may be quite shy, so the ones that actually manage to go into fields that we are able to see them more, perhaps they tend to have a higher dose of Nai or a use of it or a predisposition towards more Nai than some other riffs do, but those happen to be one we see more. So I'm curious about that when we start getting into maybe vloggers where I think it's not as prohibitive of what mojos show up there. I think there might be more mojos on there because there's less institutional or marketplace restrictions on who can do it. So I'm curious how that opens up riffs. All in all, this is a good quiz, and I tend to revisit each of these quizzes again in the future. Me too. I'm going to replay and just get it so perfect, which may be a month from now to clean up my lens further by honing in on certain aspects of it, for sure. I personally like the idea of doing a good general pass to see the entire landscape or ship of something, and then focus on individual areas as interest comes in to make those areas more available. And the general passes naturally become more and more specific. Agreed. Overall, I don't see myself not working this mojo phenomenon case, so naturally I come to see all its interesting and important angles and attractions. Great stuff. It is great stuff. And this is cool now. I can kind of like, I can make different buffet platters of it. I'm sure this must be what it feels like for certain archaeologists as they get more and more stuff up. There's all kinds of galleries of it they can put together, and each of those gallery cross sections of the massive amount of data that's being unearthed gives a different way of, say it's a city or massive people complex of some kind, getting a better understanding of what that life was. In this case, it's what things are, and therefore what they're likely to be in the future. But definitely, we're looking at what they are now and seeing different ways to group them for examination and to juxtapose them to each other. It gives different ahas. So each one's like a nice aha. So I'm really enjoying stacking these series of experiments up because each one has these built-in like ahas to them. So we're stacking aha. Glenn, you go on to answer the questions that are like the end of series 1 questions. Can you see these physiological cues with significant regularity, 75% or more? You say, yes, I see the cues and my score is also at or above 75%. I'm particularly proud of this feat, especially since I'm able to achieve the score in a short time frame and on my first try with given quizzes. This may change as the difficulty ramps up, but for now it is still a manageable level for me and quite easy for me to accomplish. Excellent. And I really do appreciate the fine nuance of what is challenging in what ways and at what levels, because that's really helpful knowing how to lay it out for other people and what to tell them to expect and what they can possibly do to prepare for it. Did you find it interesting to try to make these visual distinctions as an exercise? Yes, it is immensely fascinating that I'm able to track something, as many people say, and do it with consistent regularity. I can spot distinctions quite easily, and with enough time to sit with samples, I can increase my mojo accuracy to 100% on a particular case. Separating the cues along with combining them is fun. Understand the distinctions and how they manifest themselves on the face and the rest of the body. Agreed. The anatomy of the subtle body, right? You have the anatomy of the body, and then there's the subtle body. This is anatomy of the subtle body. Is watching humans for subtle cues enjoyable for you? Yes, the act of people watching is fun for me. So the question is, and his answer is, yes, the act of people watching is fun for me and also challenging as well because I want to make sure I do it well. At times, the work can become difficult given certain cases being harder to completely digest. But I find these samples to be especially enlightening because they help me overcome personal biases and understand the math of humans that much better. Excellent. That's how to come at it. You also mentioned here that it's challenging as you want to make sure you do well. I'm curious if you could, if at any point in the future, if you want to maybe elaborate on what that desire is, why you have it, and why you have it, what can make that feel satiated, and what that feeling of being satiated is like. All right. Question is, do you find it interesting that these distinctions are there to be noted? His answer, yes, of course. I find it greatly liberating to know these distinctions exist and they can be tracked empirically. It's nice to know that the subtle body actually has something you can actually track with some firmness. It's subtle, but once you're able to track it, like tracking animal patterns, it's subtle, but once you're able to do it, you can track very firm animal traffic patterns. that data can be very firm once the very subtle observations of their tracks can be deciphered. Question, was there satisfaction felt when you looked for these distinctions with your lens and then your lens was able to find them? Yes, he says. When searching for an answer and having it validated by being correct is amazing. Yeah, it'd be good to talk about, not right now, whenever you want, just more perhaps description, even if it's like a small amount of what exactly, not exactly, but roughly what that feeling of amazing is. Being able to describe it in any kind of thought-provoking and perhaps even provocative language, not provocative, but eliciting language would be good, because it'll help people to understand kind of like what it's all about and what they can gain from it, because these things we're talking about, they are complex and subtle experiences. So the observation is of complex, subtle data to be observed, but the experience of it actually has a lot to it that is powerful, but it is subtle and complex and difficult to actually put to words. So any ability to put it to words is very, very helpful. Glenn says, I feel like I'm really tracking something and it has a weight to it which is more than just theoretical to me. Oh, good to know. Even making incorrect calls and samples, I can feel a sense of confusion or anticipating of an incorrect answer coming my way, which further tells me that there is something to this phenomenon. Good, that's like how people learn to track, is you're able to see the clear ones and there are other ones you can't see, but you know there are other trackers who can see those other ones stronger, and they're telling us this way. And even themselves, they have to correct things and figure out where they're wrong, because tracking is very difficult. And as things get more and more advanced, fewer and fewer trackers can actually get it right every time. But tracks related to patterns of animal traffic, that is a firm connection. And this kind of learning, this gets into something else, is that well, I like the tracker analogy. You can also use surfing or climbing or other analogies like that where there's a lot of skill to it, but you also have to come at it with the right headspace. Besides skill, you really have to be dialed in and really ready to be doing that kind of work. And then the experience of it and learning how you do it, it's more kind of direct feet based. In this case, you're sitting still, but your eyes are doing or not doing something. It is actually still a physical feat. And so getting better at it, you kind of do as you're saying. You can note how well you're able to do it, and then you just keep trying to do that activity until that muscle is able to do what you can feel it's built to do, but it can't do it yet. Glenn continues, one thing I know for sure is that this phenomenon is not random, because even when updates are made, they feel more correct than the read was previously, and everything in my virtual village feels more clean and like it fits correctly. Well, hopefully that is be coming to a end on the A-grade samples in the near future. I'm working to have those be our first data bedrock, hopefully by the middle of this year or sooner. But that may still happen in the future, so it's good to mention. And as we go higher up with the data, further and further out, more and more challenging samples, there's more chance that, we have to adjust understanding on that one to be there. But it is good to know that you can see enough that these are here to be tracked, and it's a question of how muddied and or faint are these tracks, and how difficult does that make that, and is that sample even readable for whatever the strongest reading ability is. But just like telescopes to stars, keep getting stronger lenses, because it's there waiting for lenses strong enough to see what it's got to show. That says, as time goes on, these subtle elusive tracks I'm currently navigating when Mojo reading are sure to become more firm and easier to see. I say this with confidence because this has been the trend over the years. Indeed. Initially it was hard to see, but it gradually became more clear, and my educated guess is that it will only become clearer as time goes on. Indeed. Learning how to flint knap for humans, learning how to heat things up so that they can become harder, like different degrees of pottery, learning how to track animal tracks. These are subtle things to learn about how the natural world works, but once you can do it, you can start building fluency on it. Once you got enough purchase that you can work with it at all. And I think now at the A-grade samples, that is enough of a purchase that we can begin to really work and then stack on what this means of what we can see here, and taking that and go, okay, we can see that here, these are clearer tracks, let's use that to try and figure out these fainter, more tricky tracks. Question, do you think that these cues you have noted might mean something? Glenn says, yes, they hint at a way in which people work and a very fundamental math that is hard to track, but is nonetheless there. I've always known this to be true, and the meaning is very significant to me. Excellent. Question, are you inclined to look for these cues in people you see going forward to see where and how often these distinctions might continue to show up? Glenn says, yes, and I have been ever since I first started training to spot these cues. I've taken a proactive approach when it comes to learning about people and what makes them tick, and this phenomenon has aided me greatly in that. I always ask myself what a person's quality is and what that means for me and how I interact with them, as well as what for them. So over here, you're talking about being out and about. That's something else that perhaps we can emphasize as people are doing, that is sort of like ambient, even proactive, but kind of like at your pace, independent training, going around and using what you've learned so far. Even the first Series 1 skills, those are 3 solid skills a person had before, and now they can start using them. I think I may have touched on that lightly, but I think that's something that can be a reoccurring thing to mention, because that really does increase without as much effort as the more formal, intense, training, working with a program and so forth. But it is still training that you can do a larger volume of, because it's sort of like when it feels good for you, but that's building hours, and it's building proof of concept. The fact that you are able to see it. So that's something I mentioned. So both the reward of it and the proof of concept of it. Excellent. Final question here. Does knowing these distinctions arise a strong curiosity in you to see what other patterns of subtle physiological cue distinctions there might be? Glenn says, yes. As I firm up one aspect of a person's qualia, I also wish to then understand any other parts of their energy that I still haven't been able to pin down. The curiosity is great and has a mind in its own, in a way. Even when not thinking about it, I can feel myself working to take in more data and understand what it means overall. Excellent. Excellent. This also brings up, perhaps mentioning that as well, is maybe a few more series so they can see a few more sets of patterns, but then basically conceptualizing what this might mean. So that'd be a good thing to bring up, since you did as well. I think that's good. Is there's the formal taking of the experiments, but then there's the on your own, out and about. But then there's in your head, start to try to think on what this might mean as you learn more and more of these patterns and how they overlap. So that's something I think I'll mention somewhere along these series in the beginner set. All right, that was great stuff, Glenn, and I think it's a great test pilot through, because you gave me a lot of good information to work with on your experiences. Also some different kind of wording of things, describing of things. That's very helpful to know. And the spirit that you came at answering the final questions, that's spot on. And anyone else coming forward, this is a great person to see how they went forward and note that you don't have the same words, had the exact same sentiments and experiences that Glenn had, but this kind of thing where one's energy is up and positive and enjoying the experience and feeling this is a good return on their energetic investment, that is very, very helpful. And there's a great many varieties of that. So you can do it in a way that is more add or more dir, for example, but it's going to still be, I'm enjoying this, I want to do more of this, where's this going? And then just keeps taking you forward and forward in this wonderful upward cycle. All right then, Glenn, looks like we're all set for the Series 2 experiments. So look for the first one of those to be coming out soon.